Oh man, last time I did not stop to think about just how much harder the ground rules I laid out for what can be included on these end-of-year lists would make writing this video. Again, this was a really good year for the Transformers, so being limited to only figures that came out for the first time ever this year, no retools or re-releases of figures from previous years, really puts a damper on filling out this list, when, odds are, any given figure from this year in particular was actually good. This has made a lot of your predictions wrong. I've gotten tons of messages from people excited to see Ursi and Die Atlas on this list, but they can only be on here in spirit, as Ursi is a figure from 2020 and Die Atlas is even older. I just barely scraped together 10 figures for the worst list this year, and one that I was on the fence about calling a dishonorable mention, but I decided I just wouldn't have any of those. It'd be stupid to have just one, and not even really be sold on calling it that altogether. Theoretically, it could have been easy to make this video if I just cheaped out and included the entire Red Line and the buzzworthy Worlds Collide box set, but that would have been the point where I gave up. Speaking of giving up, I'm not going to bother shooting new footage for this video. I'd like to say it's because these are the worst of year figures, so they don't deserve it. But honestly, it's just, why would I bother shooting new video when all I'm basically going to do is hold it up to camera and tell it sucks? I already have plenty of video of these figures just standing there. Why would I waste the time and shoot it twice for this particular list? If this is the first time you've ever seen one of my videos, I guess at least it will be new to you. And this is going to be another hard list to make because while there are just a couple who barely deserve to be on this list, the bottom 7 really all feel like they should probably be number 1. Alright, to not waste your time anymore, number 10. 86 Cup. Wow, I've already pissed people off. Like I said, it's a year where I'm strapped for bad figures to complain about, and so I'm going to settle for a not good one as my number 10. In the absolutely stellar 86 line, this one really just falls short. He doesn't pose well, he falls apart because of the terribly misguided gimmick, and he's got that horrible Willem Dafoe face. Like, not to cast shade on Willem Dafoe, but this belongs on a goblin figure, not Cup. Really, the cardinal sin of this thing is the transformation. Some people like this, and I don't get it. It already wouldn't be a fun one, but I can admit it's kind of clever, in a way that also somehow feels lazy at the same time. But the limbs falling off is such a nightmare. It's almost impossible to transform this guy for me without popping off one of his arms or legs, especially when going from vehicle to robot. I would glue them down if the designers weren't jackasses who made the only swivels the limbs have the cuts for the dismemberment gimmick. I either have to ruin the figure's posability, or let the figure ruin its own transformation. And that's why this is on this list. It would be a decent figure otherwise. Number 9. Buzzworthy Worlds Collide Black Arachnia. This figure is on here basically as a totem for the whole set, because it's the only one that's allowed to be on here. Yes, the other figures are worse. The Bumble Jumper that's not a Bumble Jumper is already based on a bad mold, but it's managing to do it even worse by having cancerous materials and not having a reason to exist without the correct head, and the Fangry is impressively rank. But it's a retool of a retool of a retool of a figure that's half a decade old at this point. So while you can expect it would be at least a little primitive, it's also loose to the point of uselessness, and the materials are precisely as bad as the Bumble Jumper. But as a retool of a figure that old, this doesn't count for this list. And the Nemesis Primal is actually decent, despite still being made of garbage, so that leaves poor Black Arachnia as the odd woman out here. New enough to actually be counted on this list, bad enough that it doesn't get a pass like the Nemesis, not bad enough to be the figure from this set that truly deserves the position. I do fear this breaking more than the others, not just because it's got the thinnest joints of the bunch, and therefore the most breakable joints of the bunch with this piss-poor plastic, but I also fear this breaking because I actually fear it, because I actually want to keep this around. That's how good this year was, people. A figure I like and don't want to get rid of ended up on the worst of year list. Number 8, Kingdom Titan Class Arc. As a giant robot, this makes a good spaceship. Next. Okay, I'll give you a little more. The joints on this are wretched. They sound terrible, they feel like they're going to break, and I've been told by at least 2 subscribers that theirs have broken their ratchets and now the arms just freewheel. And this has no excuse to have a head that can only swivel. But yeah, this thing's only value is as a model of the Ark, but at least that's a good thing to get out of it, even if it is too much to pay for that. Now this list gets real hard. I've been staring at the figures I have pegged to put on here for 30 minutes now, and I just can't decide what's not in the top 3. Basically, just consider everything after this point number 1. I guess number 7, Kingdom Tracks. This one should be about here, I suppose, because it wouldn't be on this list at all if it weren't designed broken. Some people say they have no problem with this thing working properly. The vast majority of people would tend to disagree with that version of reality. The legs just don't function as designed, but even if they did, this would still have problems. For instance, it's actually remarkably goofy looking, with a huge backpack and squat proportions. What does this guy have to be vain about? He's got the build of Quasimodo. The G1 figure looked cooler than this does, and it was probably bigger too, with Hasbro cheaping out on us over the last 2 years and normalizing the absolutely tiny deluxe. And like half the figure is made out of a huge contiguous section of thin clear plastic. Oh yeah, great idea there, guys. What's next? You gonna make a figure entirely out of pencil lead? Clear plastic can be fine. It can be robust. This ain't that kind of clear plastic, and every time you transform this thing, it could very well be the last time it works. Number 6, Red Cheetor. Why am I putting this at number 6? Because honestly, I don't want the red figures to bunch up on this list, and with everything being so close in terms of pure suck, it might as well go anywhere. The simple fact of the matter is, the red line was designed by a moron. I believe it to be the same moron who designed the Kingdom Rhinox, who you all absolutely know you will be seeing later on this list. Either way, this is the most pathetic failure of a toy line I've ever seen. Figures that are intended to look the most accurate of any ever designed and pose the best with the best accessories, all to be gained by sacrificing the transformation and alt mode. Unfortunately, they didn't realize they were supposed to stop there, so they ended up sacrificing literally everything, and they forgot to gain anything. This figure doesn't particularly look like Cheetor more than any other figure because the face is so screwed up, and the Dr. Scholes he's wearing are wrong, as is the chest. Hell, they couldn't even be bothered to color him right, to color him like he is shown on his own box. Impressively incompetent, no? And this thing has joints that don't work. You unbelievable failures! You had one job and you did it wrong. And somehow they even fucked up the accessories. They made all the crap he comes with the wrong color. And I could rant more about this, but honestly, anything I can say just applies to every figure in this godforsaken line. So I may as well save some ammunition for later. Number 5, Crossover Expanse. More like, it's pants. Ha! Got you. You know how all the other crossover figures would completely sell out and then need a second run to fill the demand? That didn't happen with this. You know how Thew is the literal nicest reviewer, and he got a sponsorship to talk about this figure? He could not say nice things about it. Even getting paid, he could not say nice things. This is a figure that immediately went on 50% sale, and it still could not sell. It's nice to know that the vast majority of people still have taste. This thing is so ugly, it is so goofy, it is so not fun to handle. Parts just want to fall off, and getting everything tabbed together is pain. And the prescribed robot mode is one of the most bafflingly terrible ideas I've ever seen. For some reason, they gave him a halo of kibble that does not need to exist. Even as it is currently designed, you can just get rid of it. I swear they dredged this thing up from the greasy bottom of the dumpster of bad ideas. Doesn't even manage to pose well or be stable. Number 4, Kingdom Scorponok. I wanted to put this at number 3 so it can sit across from its catastrophically better brother on the other list, but there were just a few figures that managed to be worse than this year. It's still pretty bad. It's ugly. It's disproportionate. Unlike almost any other figure in the Kingdom line with an accurate robot mode and a realistic beast mode, this got full-on bastardized into this thing. It falls apart, it poses badly, the only thing this has going for it over the TE is a waist swivel, everything else is significantly worse. And the alt mode is rancid. It looks like a scorpion from precisely one angle, and then from every other it just looks wrong. But most damningly of all, the transformation sucks on this thing. And it took me forever to figure out a way to describe how it feels, but I finally managed it. It feels like you only do half of it. And I don't mean that you only transform the torso or you only transform the legs. It feels like every step you do, you only half complete. The head only bends halfway down. The chest opens but never closes, the legs bend at the knee and do nothing but hope you don't look at them, and the bug limbs just spin around and pray they make contact with the ground. There is only one half an ass in this transformation, and it is one of the least satisfying processes I've ever experienced because of it. Number 3, Kingdom Rhinox. There are people who like this figure, but almost to a man, they tell me over and over, yeah, I like this figure, robot mode and beast mode are great, but I don't transform it if I can help it. And isn't that a bad sign? Isn't the fact that there is an aspect of this figure not even the people who like this thing want to engage with a sign of how much it sucks? But that isn't the last of it. Most people get this thing for the sole reason of filling out their maximal team, and then they just shove this garbage as far back on their shelves as they can into the darkest corner they can find, just so it's less noticeable how hideous this thing is. And that's not even conjecture on my part. I know at least 20 people who have sent me comments telling me that's exactly what they do to cope with how bad this looks. So, it's ugly, but it also poses badly, and the shoulders are a nightmare. It's weirdly thin, the legs are horribly unfinished and weirdly smooth with giant gaps in them, and honestly, all of that could have been forgiven if this didn't have one of the worst transformations I've ever dealt with in a Chug figure. Quite possibly the worst if it's entirely confined to Chug figures. From the shoulders up, it's bland and boring, but the legs are a nightmare of flexing plastic and unnatural feeling steps where you have to fight every part into place, and you just end up with a hollow shell that feels ready to collapse. But somehow, there are 2 worse figures this year. Number 2, Red RC. Can't RC just get a good damn figure? Ursi would have won the top spot back in 2020 if I did a list that year, but here we have what basically amounts to another non-transforming RC. The Ursi was non-transforming, shut up. She had a backpack that was a car, and she hid under it. You can literally entirely separate the two by driving out one pin. But somehow, this is even worse, because at least the Ursi could pose. The red Ursi poses worse than any Legends figure I've ever run into. This is borderline an Action Master from 1990. None of the limbs can bend more than 90 degrees, despite that being the whole point of this line. It's made out of the worst materials I've ever seen on a mainline figure. And the build is so trash, it literally damages itself if you use it. It cannot handle the rigors of moving the way it's supposed to move. Sure, it looks more like the character than any figure of her that has ever existed before, but honestly, you'd be better off buying a porcelain statue of her, because at least that would be more durable. NumberOne. I wanted to like this. I bought this because I wanted to support the underdog, a new company just starting out. I was hoping I could give them some publicity. Maybe get them 1 or 2 sales, because we can always use more companies in this sphere. If you've been watching my channel a long time, I challenge you to guess right now what figure I'm talking about. It's definitely a disappointment, and one I constantly forget exists. I have not looked at this thing in basically the full year since I did the review, and I plan to continue to do that after this video once again. Mechanical Alliance Bumblebee Movie Blitzwing. You sure do get a big figure for what you pay at least. That's the only nice thing I can say about this. This thing sucks, and it has problems I've never seen before. For starters, it's disgusting to touch. The grime wash they used to make it look grimy is also just grimy. It makes your hands feel dirty. A more normal problem is that none of the joints are toleranced properly, so it's loose as a prostitute. It weighs a lot, so if it falls down like it's prone to do, it will damage itself. I can only describe the transformation as what I would comfortably say is the worst I've ever experienced. It's made of panels upon panels, folding in on each other infinitely, with parts that just don't want to go where they're supposed to, terrible directions, no one online has a good video on how to do this, and the entire time you are doing it, it makes your hands feel disgusting. I never want to transform this again. I want to have never done it in the first place. And then the alt mode sucks too. It's almost okay, but the wings don't want to peg on at all. There are gaps everywhere where the plastic refused to sit where it's supposed to, and the whole thing is vibrating with potential energy, ready for the internals to spring out of it at a moment's notice, because the only way to get the parts to fit is to use all of your strength to force things to fit into compartments too small for them until your hands bleed, and you get some kind of horrible mutant demon infection from the disgusting wash they used. I have talked about very few worse figures. Atlas was funny bad. This was just awful in every way that I can describe. Also, it broke in a minor way. But Mechanical Alliance Thunderwing is hands down, far and away, the worst figure of 2021. And here I was worried that there may not be a third-party figure on this list, because a lot fewer of them come out a year, and they tend to have a lot more effort put into designing them. How wrong I was. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please, share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.